Hi, everyone. This is Ray Luskin. I am creative activist, creative mindfulness mentor, artist, and author, and welcome to Women Who Dare. I'm so excited today. We have Jacqueline Carroll with us. I met her recently, and we just hit it off and found that we had a lot in common, lots to talk about. And I want to share a little bit of her bio with you, but we're going to have a conversation so you get to know her better. She's an attorney, a human rights advocate, a storyteller, and she has just been, she just got a new job, Midwest Regional Director for the Simon Wiesenthal Center. She also has her own
programming and development. I'm sorry, I wanted to add that.
Oh, okay. That's not what it said. Okay.
Sorry.
All right. For development. And she has her own legal consulting firm, We Persist. She does programming, works on legislation and writes opinion pieces. And she has so much more that we're going to talk about. So hi, Jacqueline. Welcome.
Hi, how you doing?
I'm doing great. Now, I was like, for everybody to know, I didn't have any power. And I called her and said, I don't know if we're going to have this conversation, but we have it. Came back
I'm
on.
glad.
The miracle of comment. What can I say? What I wanted to talk to you, let's talk about a little bit about your background, because I find it really fascinating and unusual how you got from where you are, from your educational background to being a lawyer. So why don't you tell people a little bit about that? Because you're a creative from way back.
Yeah. So I was an actress. I trained at the Royal Academy of Dramatic Art and Stella Adler, and that is what I wanted to do. But I'm also the daughter of a politician. My father was a politician and a lawyer. My mother was a lawyer, a government attorney. And my father was a delegate for Al Gore in the 2000 presidential election. And I was living in LA and trying to act. I was doing a little bit of it when he came for the convention, and he invited me to the convention floor. And it was when Joe Lieberman was speaking, and his wife, and having people shout a Jewish name, being Jewish, like it was really impactful for me. And I decided to volunteer on a political campaign, which I try to stay away from. And I loved it. And then we didn't know who our president was,
right?
Which is crazy to think about. Like 20 years later, there was, like it came down to hanging chads, and I was watching the news all the time, and I became an MSNBC and CNN junkie. And I was at an audition, and I remember this very clearly. I was at an audition, and the Supreme Court was going to do their oral arguments, and I had to hear them. And the audition was running late, and I was looking at the guys next to me in the room, and one turns to the other and goes, "Dude, you could totally get this. You love Chex Mix." And I thought, I can't do this. This is not for me. And I called my friend who's a producer, crying, and I called my dad, and I said, I can't do this anymore. And I left, and I decided to become a lawyer.
Well, I think it's really important that people realize that a calling can come from any place. You know, your purpose, you may think you're in one direction, but there's an incident, something happens, somebody gets sick, you lose a loved one, and then all of a sudden your life changes, just like how many lives changed on 9/11, okay, yeah. I'm going to do this, I'm going to enlist, I'm going to do, become a firefighter, whatever it was. We all find purpose in different ways. And I think that's what's really nice to hear your story, because it'll come full circle a little bit towards the end of our conversation.
Yeah.
And I think that's really important. Because part of my mission is to tell people, it's finding your legacy, creating that. What do you want to be known and remembered for? Which is just what you were talking about. And so I love to hear your story and let people know that you don't have to know it right away. There's situations, there's work you can do to figure it out. You can find coaches and people to help you. And, there are books out there on it. That's why I wrote The Creative Activist, Make the World Better, One Person, One Action at a Time, because we are more powerful than we think, and we have all these options, and we just have to get out of our own fear zone or scarcity zone to say, okay, I can do this.
I think that's a huge issue, is getting out of your fear zone. I was working out this morning, and my Peloton instructor said, it's okay not to feel guilty to say no to something. And it's okay to go past your fear and say yes.
Yeah. And that's hard, unless you have a really supportive partner or somebody, because we get stuck in our head in that monkey mind and that loop that just keeps going, I can't do this, I'm not worthy, I'm not smart enough, I'm not this. And it challenges us to figure out how can we move beyond that. And usually I don't believe it's always by ourselves. We need somebody, some coach or mentor, somebody to push us, an accountability partner, whether it's exercise, losing weight, it doesn't matter what it is. When we get stuck in our heads, we don't know how to get out. So yeah.
Yeah, you do.
So
You need friends, you need coaches, you need other people to help you I love what the monkey mind is so true, because it's so easy to, my grandmother used to call it, or my mom used to call it, a Jack story. It just get bigger and bigger and bigger in your mind when it's just really a small thing, and it doesn't mean it's going to happen. But we ruminate on things so
oh
easily.
yeah. I know. I ruminated on something yesterday as I called my friend this morning. I couldn't wait to get up, and I said, okay, you got to help me get through this. She said, hey, let it go. We're all human, and there's something we wish we had said. How many times have we been in a situation where I wish we spoke up, whether it's about, there was an anti-Semitic joke or whatever it is. We get stuck and we get fearful, and then we don't say it, and then we beat ourselves up. Well, that doesn't help anybody. So yeah. So I want to move on to a little bit of more, you work for the state's attorney's office, you did some work there. So tell us a little bit more about that journey, and then how you ended up, working for Simon Wiesenthal.
So it's funny is I joined the state's attorney's office initially interning in election law. But normally there are not contested elections. There's not a lot of, legal work to do there.
Used to be anyway.
Correct.
Yeah.
But so that's how I started. That's where I interned in the civil division. And then back then, the state attorney's office, you have to go through, it's like a training, or it's like school where you freshman year, sophomore year, you kind of have to learn and grow. So I started off in the criminal side once I graduated from law school. And I actually worked briefly for a legislator, and I helped write the smoking ban, the Chicago Clean Air Ordinance.
I was really glad when that came in.
Thank you. And then I started working for the state's attorney's office. I started in criminal appeals and learning how to abstract and write. And you're writing briefs, but abstracting, I think, was actually very important for me. And I've used for the rest of my career, where you go through pages, and what's important, here's the page number and here's the quote. And that's affected me for my entire life, to really get to what's the essence, what's important, and to know where to find it.
Oh, okay. That's interesting. So how else have you used it in your life? I mean, you're saying it's I'm just curious. I mean, I copy quotes from people, but I don't necessarily document the page and think about that. But I try it. I have books of quotes, because those things impact me. And, I've used them in many, parts of my life.
Well, one of the things I've been working on, so I'm no longer I guess I'm technically still with We Persist, but now I'm going to have to give that up because I'm working with the Simon Wiesenthal Center, which just happened a little over a week ago. But I've been working on this treatise called The Holocaust and the Law with a bunch of law professors around the country. And I've been looking at books. And so I will write down the book, and then on the left-hand side be the page, and this is the quote, or this is the information, not just quotes, but also this is the essential information that I'm going to want to use in our chapters of the book.
Mm-hmm.
So, but in other legal work, I used it.
Okay, so why don't you talk about the Holocaust and the law a little bit? What are you hoping to, what is the, the premise of it? What are you hoping to use it for, in what way?
So John Geringer is one of the editors. He's amazing if you don't know him, but the idea is it's rarely taught in law schools. And but it should be. There's so many aspects of what happened in Germany that should be taught and are really interesting. Like there's a chapter that we're going to be doing on the Eugenics Movement, and that actually started in America. The Nazis were like, "Oh, we like what you did here in America, but you're a little harsh. Let's change it." It's extraordinary. So the idea is to have a unified treatise, or like in essence, like a textbook that's also very modern and up to date with jump links. So people can come in and as law professors and say, I want to teach this to law schools, and to get it done across the nation.
Yeah, well, especially it's so hard today with the changes in the laws, especially like in Texas, about teaching, you can't teach this without this. And, and it's like, how do you pursue that? I mean, that's an interesting conversation itself.
Right.
And for me, when you were talking, I assume you're going to have one on restoration for art that was stolen too.
There is a chapter on that. That
was always something that truly intrigued me. And I forgot the name of the movie they did on it.
A girl in the woman in gold painting, something like that.
Yeah. So, things like that. That was, just something that, really touched on me, and and just how restoration is done, because restoration, whether it's talking about how do we restoration for families that were slaves, restoration for art that was stolen, there has to be some intersections here and conversation that can come from those kind of things.
Right. Yeah. No, there is definitely a chapter on that.
Okay, cool. All right.
That's outside my work from Simon Wiesenthal. Was pre.
Okay, so let's talk about Simon Wiesenthal a little bit, and the work you were doing before you got this new job, so
right.
as well. And I know you've had so much with ADL, and I know you had to give that up, and so you have been an activist and in so many arenas. Even back when you were at the state's attorneys on women who had been abused, and
right.
So it's vast. So how do you arrive at saying, okay, I want to do this arena versus something else?
So I think I've always been a protector and a storyteller. That's how I think of myself, is very much, someone with a shield and a sword, and a pen. So when I was a state's attorney, an assistant state's attorney, I did work in the domestic violence unit. I also worked in a special unit that specialized in prosecuting sex crimes against children and child pornographers and abuse. And helping people really resonated with me. I left the state's attorney's office in, I want to say, 2017. And I went into private law firms. But when I did that on the side, I started getting more involved, like you said, with ADL and also the Decalogue Society of Jewish Lawyers and Judges. And I joined their board, and I became the co-chair of their committee against anti-Semitism and hate. And a couple of things happened in the last few years, one of which was I had my own incident of anti-Semitism. Something as silly as I went to get a manicure before I kind of perform in the Chicago Bar Association bar show. I like to sing and dance. And right before I decided to get a manicure. And if people look at me, they often don't realize that I'm Jewish. My last name is Carrol, and I'm in Chicago. And there's just this assumption of, oh, there's an Irish lassie for you.
And you got your red hair and all that stuff too. Yeah.
So I was getting my nails done, and there was this woman, the manicurist, started talking about being from Poland. I said, oh, I have relatives from Poland. And she started talking about the economy and the people who run the government, and having, back then I was working with ADL, not Simon Wiesenthal Center, but I kind of knew where this was going. And she, of course, made comments about it was the Jews that run the government and are ruining the country. And at one point I stopped and said, I should let you know I'm Jewish. But she doesn't stop. And she continued to say something like, well, the Jews that are in Poland now aren't real Jews. They're from some random country, but they're coming to Poland to benefit from the Holocaust.
Wow.
And I sat there and I'm like, I'm on the board of ADL. I'm on the board of Decalogue. Like, what am I supposed to do with this? And I stopped the manicure, and I asked to speak to her manager, and I went through security, and through Decalogue, we filed a complaint. They had to do training on discrimination. And so, but it's a very shocking experience to hear something like that. And I think most people just let it go. And I know when I was younger, I'd let that go, but this time I couldn't let it go. I'm the one supposed to help other people.
Right.
So,
well, it's interesting because I don't think we feel we have recourse when that comes up. Today, you have Indivisible, you have a few organizations out there trying to deal with things, but, whether it's, whatever's happening, race is the issue, not religion necessarily, at least Jewish religion. There was a time when it was all Muslim, and now it's not up in the news as much, not that it doesn't exist, but how do you handle those kind of situations? Because that's, how do you be an upstander versus, being a bystander?
Well, and that's actually one of the reasons I love being a part of the Simon Wiesenthal Center family is we do talk about being an upstander instead of being a bystander. So one of the things that I'm now working on is this mobile museum of tolerance. If you've not seen it or heard it, it's a mobile experience. It's a bus that travels around the state of Illinois, and it teaches lessons on the Holocaust, on civil rights. But one of them is called Ordinary People, and it's about how people could turn on their neighbors and why others didn't stand up. And it's about teaching not just students, but people in the community how to be an upstander instead of a bystander.
Yeah. And that's a challenge. It's, it's scary. You think about it, it's whatever it is, when we've been challenged, or what do you do or say? And I had that happen, in a situation where you watch a parent really almost being, physically abusive to a kid in public. What do you do? And it's like, where do you draw the line? How do you make those decisions? And we're all faced with it, whether it is seeing a child being abused, whether it's a racial slur, whether it's, a religious slur, and it is a complicated issue. I mean, I'm glad that you have this bus. I think that's great. I mean, it's a Holocaust museum. They have that whole upstander wall. What would you say if you could? And but it is a conversation that we still have, and I think depending on what school district you're in, how liberal, we're not getting any of those conversations, so what do we do when you have a Charlottesville? What do you do when, a synagogue or a mosque is attacked? How do you handle those things? And I don't have the answer, so I'm glad there's somebody who's working on them.
Yeah, and there are phone numbers and hotlines to call, because there's a difference between hate speech and hate crimes and things that are on the line, but there are avenues for people to call if they witness something or if they experience something.
Yeah. So, I mean, I know it's going to come down to that First Amendment kind of conversation. So,
yes,
how
that we just had.
we as an I'm part of an organization, and she was the moderator for this conversation, but I think it's still important to talk about. And I know this is your thoughts, not, Simon Wiesenthal.
Yes, I'm advocating on my own opinions and not as a newly representative person.
Right. But I think it's important to live, how do we determine what is really a First Amendment right? And when do you go too far? And this is a conversation that I think we need to have in community. Town halls on just this, because then you can get into the conversations about, guns and all the other things that are going on. When do you have a right to stand up for yourself? When don't you, So.
Yeah. Well, and a lot of people forget about the government. Like, the government cannot infringe. So you can, if someone says something that's hateful, or it says hate speech, an employer can fire them, or if they do it on social media, it can be taken down per the terms and agreements of that social media site. But it's when you're just one person, another person, and someone's saying something,
it's a different story.
Different
there
story.
Is no, government response, so yeah. And I think nobody really understands that, the general public, let's put it that way, that the government can control that. There's laws, but that's it. It's the state and what's going on in your state that really can do that, right?
I think what the problem is right now is we are living in such a polarized society. And it hurts me sometimes at just how polarized we have become, and I do feel like we were talking, like, the algorithms have really caused that, where we've gone into our bubbles, where we don't even believe the other side.
Can you explain that? I know what you're talking about, but nobody else is going to understand that.
So, and again, this wasn't my area, this was someone else's area, but Facebook and other social media sites have algorithms that, and this came out also in the Facebook papers recently, where if you liked something, it'll push you in that direction. And they wanted to instill hate in people, because the more anger you're feeling, the more you want to read more. And so you're getting more likes, and you're going back onto those websites, that, Facebook or wherever it is. And so it was good for them and good for advertising, but it's bad for people.
Because it's the only news you're hearing. That's the
only news you're hearing.
I think the number was like astronomical. It's like, if you push once on some extremist website, then you're going to get 39%, other things coming at you from that, so it's like, you'll never see anything else.
And the problem is like, once we have these implicit biases and these ideas. And so, if something you read doesn't feel right to you, you're going to discount it. Like, no, that can't be right. I remember having a conversation with a friend of mine, and for the most part, we're aligned, but when it came to political people, we were on different sides. And she said something, I'm like, that can't be right. I would have heard about that. And then I looked it up and she was right. And I thought to myself, why haven't I heard about that on the news sites that I choose to read? And she hadn't heard things that I was saying. And so we've stopped having that discourse with people who disagree with us, or that we, who don't align. And it's not just political, it's in so many different arenas where we've gone into our little echo chambers. And the problem is it's caused so much hate and it's caused so much division within families and with, and that's something that I've learned to be very careful about, is that even some of my closest friends and I have different political alignments. I don't want to lose friendships over that.
Yeah, I mean, it was interesting during COVID. I talked to one of my neighbors, and it was the first time we'd ever talked political. And it was like, and she said to me, she said, I hope I don't lose you as a friend. She said, I've lost friends because of my political views,
Yeah.
and I could see that very clearly happening, but you have to
Yeah.
work hard to say, okay, I want to hear your side, but you have to agree to disagree, that I'm not here to persuade you. I'm
Mhm.
here to listen. And I think that's a different conversation.
Well, I like what you just said about persuasion versus listening, because I think so many times we are so focused on trying to change that other person to get them to agree with us instead of listening to understand why they think the way they think. We've kind of stopped listening.
Right. And I think that's, again, that's why you can have a Holocaust, because people stop listening and asking the right questions. It's like, well, there has to be a reason, whether it's the Polish, manicurist, it's like, those Jews, they're here, they're taking advantage, it's like, there is no conversation. There's one voice that's being heard. And then and I'm as guilty as the next person. There are moments I don't want to hear their rhetoric anymore, and I just tune out. It's a them and us instead, and me instead of an us. We have lost, I think, the united of the United States.
I think that's true. And what scares me is, because I've studied so much about Germany, is, I think we really do need to listen to each other, even if the other side is very abhorrent. We don't have to agree with them, and we could fight against them if their beliefs, like if there's a belief that's white supremacist, like we can fight against that. But if it's just like, oh, I don't agree about this policy, or, I think there's a difference between someone that doesn't believe I should exist.
Right.
That's
yeah.
not what I'm talking about. Like,
yeah, no, that's a big difference.
like
Yeah.
someone that thinks that, because of who I am, because of my religion, that I shouldn't exist, or, I should stay quiet. No, I'm talking about people who we don't agree about a policy. We don't agree about a politician. We don't agree about those types of things that we need to have a discourse about. But if it's someone that is an extremist,
Right.
that thinks that any group or any race,
right, exactly, I totally agree.
There is a difference there.
Right. And they same thing. You can go to the conversation about immigrants, like they shouldn't be here. They're the worst. They're just destroying the country. Well, that's not true,
Right.
But
right.
those are it's a complicated time in our lives right now, and where we're going in this country as a whole. So
yeah,
I appreciate that. I wanted to ask you,
yeah.
I understand you're working on a play right now. Can you tell us a little bit about that? That's going back to your other roots.
Yeah, I'm actually really not supposed to talk about
okay.
it is about an act of terrorism.
Oh,
I can say that it's about an actual historic event, an act of terrorism. And I've been working with a group of people on that. And I'm just going to be honest. I have this story and I've been working on the writing, but writing dialogue is hard. Being a playwright, I have such admiration for people who can do that, because I'm very good at telling stories. But writing dialogue, I'm struggling with.
Interesting.
So if you know someone that's good at that.
Oh, you know what? Let me think about that. There might be some people that can work with you on that. So okay, good.
Yeah, because I've been sworn to secrecy, but if I talk to the people I've been working with, to just bolster, make it sound more real. because I
Okay.
have all the facts and figures, I have the story, but
Right. How do you
lexical,
get people to hear it? Dialogue is very different than facts and figures. Yeah.
right,
And I get that, you have a better appreciation because you're doing it. But,
right.
I mean, I tell you the story. A few years ago, my sister and I went to Florida in July and took a glass blowing class. 120 inside, 120 outside. It was, I have a great appreciation for glass blowers. It's not something I'd ever want to do again. A week of that was more than enough, So, I have gifts and I have skills, but that is not one of them. So I appreciate it when people, that's what I like, because I heard you were stepping out of the comfort zone
Comfort
that you've
zone.
been in for a while now, and
Yeah.
taking on something else. So what really prompted that for you? Was this during COVID? Did
The
you
playwriting.
yeah, or is it
Oh, some
longer?
people approach me because so my background is in theater. I've
Right.
directed and I've acted. And so some people that I've been working on the book with approached me about writing this play. And so I've been working on it. And it's the true facts of what happened is fantastic. And I definitely want to convey the story as best as I can. So I've been working on that.
Okay. Okay. Well, I have somebody in mind that might work. There's
Okay.
there were three women who possibly they did a program a couple years ago. Um, that one was Jewish, one was Christian, one was Muslim, and they created these stories to bring people together. And they were all over, and they all have different skill sets. And one of them, I think, might really work for you. So we'll talk after. We'll talk after that.
And what you just said, like that is something that I love because before getting a job with the Simon Wiesenthal Center, I was chairing their community engagement committee. And the whole idea is we have someone from so many different types of communities, different religions, different races, different ethnicities, different backgrounds. And the whole point was finding our similarities instead of our differences and working together to promote that type of tolerance.
Right. Oh, it
That
was
I think
so
is essential.
powerful. Yeah, this was a really powerful piece, and unfortunately, I can't think of the name of it, but we'll connect afterwards. But it was something about stories, and it was each person's story. How the Muslim woman tells the story of finding her voice on 9/11, which brought me to tears. She was in New York and what was happening and having to get her kids out of school and what was going on, and she found her voice. And those are the powerful stories that I think help shape our idea of what we're all human. We all have, our fear of our children, for our children, and if we could start looking and uniting around those core values, it would be really different.
It's so funny. Spike Lee just did a documentary series on 9/11 and COVID. And I remember he was saying how all of us as Americans after 9/11, we were just so united. And it was so wonderful to be able to be so united after such a horrible attack. And my husband said something about it too. And I said, actually, that's not true. Because the one group that was ostracized were Muslims, or even Sikhs, like people who even remotely look like they could be. They experience horrible hate crimes afterwards,
Right.
and
And we have Asians today because it's the Asian flu, and there's the uptake in hate crimes there is like astronomical.
and there's been hate crimes against Jews. So I actually did
Yeah.
a panel discussion with the members of the Cook County Bar Association, which is the African American Bar Association, the Asian American Bar Association, and Decalogue, and I was representing Decalogue with the Attorney General. And what people didn't know is on these websites, social media, Parler, Facebook, Twitter, etc., people were blaming the Jews for COVID. They were blaming Israel. They were blaming the Jews and saying part of this vast global conspiracy and we're the reason behind it. And we're also
I remember in the beginning, that's when they went and bombed the temple in Philly, I think it was, or something.
Well, that happened before, but
oh yeah, okay.
But people, it's that same type of mentality is that Jews control the world and therefore, they're somehow benefiting from this. And they're like, there was definitely cartoons saying, if you see a Jew, cough on them. And, but people didn't talk about that.
Right.
The rise in hate crimes, I think Jews are 2% of the population and 58% of hate crimes.
Yeah, I just want to cry, when you say those statistics, it's so sad.
but the rise against hate crimes against Asians, that was very physical. It was physical, not just, hate speech. It was also the hate crimes, very, very brutal and so completely unfair. And that's the otherism, something that I've always tried to fight against is, you're the bad guy. And to find that scapegoat, that other, and to dehumanize them and to harm them. And that's something that we really need to fight against.
Yes, yes, we do. Okay, so let's talk about something a little happier to end.
Okay. Okay.
So what else do you have coming up, that something that would bring great joy to you that's coming up for you soon?
Thanksgiving.
Okay.
My stepdaughter and her husband and my grandson. I know. My grandson's coming in town and we're going to have like a full house, and my stepson, like, it's just really exciting to have a full house because we've been COVID scared for a really long time. And now, I just got my booster. We're all very, very vaccinated and we're going to do it. We're going to have everybody in the room.
Very exciting. I know I'm going downtown to have Thanksgiving, my whole family, at my nephew's, my sister's flying in from Florida, the same kind of thing, that we're actually getting together. We still all have young grandchildren, so they're not vaccinated yet, but it is what it is. So
and then I'll see my other side of the family, my side of the family earlier. And then, we're going to do two things because,
Yeah, well, I think that's what we have to look for, the bright side, and also look for hope that there is going to be light after COVID, that yes, it's brought to light a lot of issues that we still have to work on as community and the world. But at the same time, hopefully families found each other during COVID, and respect and love for each other that we may not have had before.
I think resiliency. I think about, we couldn't have done this before Zoom,
right?
Different ways, different companies stepped up. There was the bad, but there was also the good. And right. I can see my family members in LA more than I could before through
right.
Zoom.
I know, I never done Passover with my son in California before. It was like, oh my God, we all got on, it was like, this was a blessing, to say, oh, we could do that. I would never have thought of it. If you couldn't fly there, you didn't get together. So, yeah.
Right. So I do have a different appreciation for some of the technology and ideas that were created because of COVID.
Right.
Yeah.
So thank you so much. I so appreciate this conversation. I hope everybody else finds it as fascinating and interesting as I do. And I always like to end with a quote.
Okay.
So, how wonderful it is that nobody need wait a single moment before starting to improve the world. That's by Anne Frank. And I always love that quote. So thank you so much, Jacqueline. And thanks again. And we'll talk soon, everybody.
Talk soon. Bye.
Bye.